According to Carl Jung's insights, your mind doesn't stay busy for no reason. It moves, spins, and loops as if trying to solve something that can't be named. You tell yourself you're just being careful, prepared, responsible, but deep down you know it's more than that. Carl Jung once said that much of our inner noise is not random. It's communication. A message from the parts of ourselves we rarely acknowledge. Overthinking is not simply a habit. It's the mind's attempt to keep balance between what we show and what we hide. Every repeated thought, every what-if, every imagined outcome is a signal from something deeper trying to reach the surface. You may think your thoughts are protecting you, but sometimes they're protecting you from yourself. From silence. From the truth that rises in the quiet. And that's why the mind stays loud, because stillness feels dangerous. This is what Jung understood. Our thoughts are not just thoughts. They are mirrors, fragments of the unseen conversation within, and until you understand that language, your mind will keep repeating itself, hoping you'll finally listen. So let's look closer at the 5 reasons you can't stop overthinking, and what those restless thoughts might really be trying to tell you. The first reason you can't stop overthinking is simple, but it runs deep. The mind fills silence it doesn't understand. When everything goes quiet, something instinct begins to stir, and that silence can feel uncomfortable, almost threatening. So your mind rushes to fill it with thoughts, scenarios, plans, and replays of what's already done. It's as if your mind fears the stillness more than the noise itself. Carl Jung noticed that what we avoid facing often hides in silence. When the world grows quiet, the unspoken parts of you begin to surface. The questions you've postponed, the emotions you've numbed, the truths you've brushed aside. And rather than listen, the mind builds distractions out of endless thinking. Overthinking becomes a shield, not against the world, but against the unknown within. The more uneasy the silence feels, the faster the mind moves to fill it, but in doing so, it buries the very understanding it's searching for. That's why your thoughts keep looping, not because you need more answers, but because you haven't learned to stay still long enough to hear what the silence is saying. Sometimes the cure for overthinking isn't to think less. It's to stop running from the quiet that could finally explain it. The second reason you can't stop overthinking is that you're trapped in the surface self. Carl Jung called this outer layer the persona, the version of yourself that faces the world. It's the mask you wear to appear confident, kind, capable, or calm. It's not fake, but it's only one part of who you are. When you live too long through this surface self, everything starts to feel like a performance. You think before you speak, you analyze every action, you replay every moment, wondering how it looked, how it sounded, how it was received. Your mind never rests because it's busy managing appearances, trying to make sure the mask stays perfect. Jung understood that this constant self-monitoring creates an inner split, the person you show and the person you suppress. Overthinking becomes the effort of holding those two versions together, keeping the mask from slipping. And the more pressure you feel to maintain that image, the more restless your thoughts become. You begin to confuse reflection with rumination. You tell yourself you're just being careful, but really you're trying to avoid being seen without your defenses. That's why every choice feels heavier than it should. Because your mind isn't just making decisions. It's protecting a version of you that isn't free to be imperfect. You're not thinking too much, you're protecting too much. And the thoughts won't stop until you start trusting the parts of yourself that exist beyond the mask. The third reason you can't stop overthinking is that unmet inner needs turn into endless loops. Carl Jung observed that what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves doesn't disappear. It finds another way to express itself. When your emotional needs go unheard, your mind takes over the conversation. It begins to circle thoughts that seem important, but never lead anywhere. You start replaying situations, dissecting words, predicting outcomes, all to soothe a quiet discomfort you can't name. You tell yourself you're searching for answers, but deep down, you're searching for balance. The mind keeps looping because it's trying to solve what the heart has been forced to ignore. Maybe it's the need to feel secure, to feel capable, to feel seen. But when those needs stay buried, the thinking never ends. It just shifts shape. From worry to planning, from analyzing to self-criticism. Every thought becomes another attempt to fill the space where clarity should be. Jung understood that thought often replaces feeling when we don't know how to face it. So instead of asking, "What am I feeling right now?" the mind asks, "What went wrong? What will happen? What should I do?" The questions grow louder, but the answers never come, because they're being asked in the wrong language. That's why overthinking feels exhausting. It's your inner self asking to be understood through logic when it's really asking to be felt. You don't need to think more clearly, you need to listen more deeply, because every unfinished thought is just an emotion waiting to be named, and once you name it, the loop finally breaks. The fourth reason you can't stop overthinking is that you mistake control for understanding. Carl Jung noticed that when the mind feels uncertain, it tries to regain order by tightening its grip. It begins to believe that if it can just think long enough, plan far enough, or predict every possible outcome, nothing can go wrong. So you analyze every detail, replay every word, and question every decision, not because you enjoy it, but because it feels safer than not knowing. Overthinking gives the illusion of control. It feels like progress, but it's really paralysis dressed as protection. The mind convinces you that by turning a thought over one more time, you'll finally understand it. But understanding doesn't grow from fear. It grows from acceptance. Jung would say that control is a substitute for trust, not trust in the world, but trust in your own capacity to handle it. When that trust weakens, thought takes over like a defense system. You plan because you don't feel prepared. You analyze because you don't feel safe. You replay the past because you can't predict the future. But no matter how carefully you think, the unknown remains. And the more you try to master it, the more it exposes the limits of thought itself. You can't outthink uncertainty. You can only learn to stand in it without collapsing. The truth is, overthinking isn't about clarity. It's about control. And the moment you stop chasing control, understanding quietly appears. Because what the mind can't solve, awareness can simply hold. The fifth reason you can't stop overthinking is that the shadow you ignore keeps whispering. Carl Jung believed that every person carries a hidden side, the shadow, made up of the thoughts, emotions, and traits we push away because they don't fit the image we want to see. But what's buried doesn't vanish. It waits. And when ignored for too long, it speaks in disguise, often through the noise of your own mind. Every intrusive thought, every sudden doubt, every strange feeling that appears without reason may not be random at all. It's the unacknowledged part of you trying to make itself known. You silence it with logic, you cover it with distraction, but it finds its way back. In loops, in worries, in the endless need to think your way out of yourself. Overthinking becomes the language of what's been left unseen. The thoughts you can't quiet might not be trying to harm you. They might be trying to help you notice what you've ignored. The frustration you feel toward your own mind is really a message from within. Stop analyzing me. Listen to me. Jung understood that the path to clarity begins not with fixing the mind, but with hearing what it's been trying to say all along, because the thoughts you resist most fiercely often contain the truth you so need to face. What you refuse to face in silence returns as endless thought. And once you stop running from it, once you listen instead of analyze, the noise begins to fade. Not because it's solved, but because it's finally been heard. Maybe your thoughts have never been the enemy. Maybe they've been trying to teach you something, but you've been too busy fighting them to notice Carl Jung often suggested that the things that disturb us most hold the greatest potential for understanding. If you stop arguing with your thoughts and start listening to them, you'll realize they're not just noise, they're signals. When your mind won't quiet down, it's often because you're avoiding stillness. You fill silence because silence reveals what comfort hides. The lesson buried here is simple. Stillness is not dangerous. It's revealing. Each time you run from the quiet, you also run from the truth waiting inside it. And when your mind obsesses over every move, every word, every impression, it's teaching you that you've grown too attached to your surface self. You've mistaken approval for peace. You think through every possibility because you're trying to protect the version of yourself that feels acceptable. But no matter how perfect you appear, the mind will never rest until you stop performing and start existing. It's not asking you to be fearless, just honest. When thoughts repeat like echoes, circling the same question over and over, they're telling you that something inside remains unmet. You may believe you're searching for clarity, but what you're really searching for is connection, with your own needs, your own voice. Each loop is an emotional request disguised as logic. And until you acknowledge what you truly need, your mind will keep speaking in riddles. So when your thoughts tighten around every unknown, trying to predict and plan every outcome, they're showing you your relationship with control. The lesson isn't to plan less, it's to trust more. To realize that understanding doesn't come from mastering every detail, but from letting life unfold without a script. Your thoughts cling to control because they fear what happens without it. But peace only begins when that grip starts to loosen. And finally, when your mind whispers the things you don't want to think, the memories, the doubts, the strange flashes that make you uneasy, that's your shadow trying to speak. It doesn't come to harm you. It comes to be seen. The more you deny it, the louder it grows. Overthinking is its voice knocking on the walls of your awareness, asking to be recognized, not rejected. So maybe the goal isn't to stop thinking, it's to start learning. Your overthinking isn't random. It's your mind's way of saying something inside you is asking to be understood. And when you finally listen, without judgment, without control, without the mask, the mind no longer needs to repeat itself. Because once the message is heard, the noise becomes silence again. Not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of peace. Overthinking doesn't always make itself obvious. It doesn't always shout or rage. Sometimes it whispers. And the first step toward understanding your thoughts is noticing the subtle ways they take over your mind. You may find yourself replaying the same scenarios over and over. Past moments, conversations, or decisions loop endlessly, even though the answers aren't waiting there anymore. The mind is trying to solve something it cannot solve, because it's not the facts that matter, it's the feeling beneath them. Or maybe making decisions feels impossible. Even small choices come with a storm of what-ifs, weighing every possibility, every imagined outcome. This isn't weakness. It's the mind clinging to control, mistaking thought for security. Jung would say it's the ego protecting itself afraid to step into the unknown. Sometimes your thoughts are exhausting rather than enlightening. Instead of clarity, you feel drained, restless, or anxious. When thinking becomes heavy, it's a signal. The mind is circling something deeper, something it wants you to notice. You might notice patterns you can't seem to break. Loops, repetitions, cycles of worry or overanalyzing. They keep returning no matter how hard you try to stop them. This is often the shadow speaking, quietly knocking on the walls of your awareness. The mind is saying, "See me, listen to me. I have something important to show you." And then there's the most subtle sign of all. Quiet moments feel uncomfortable or heavy. When stillness arrives, your thoughts rush in to fill it. The silence feels threatening, even though it's only inviting you to see what you've been avoiding. Jung would suggest that the mind is restless because the parts of you it hides from have yet to be acknowledged. These signs aren't flaws, they are messages. Overthinking is not your enemy. It's your inner guide disguised as chaos. It's the mind speaking in riddles, trying to draw your attention to what you've overlooked, denied, or pushed aside. Recognizing the signs allows you to respond differently. Not by forcing the thoughts away, not by judging yourself for them, but by observing, by listening, and by understanding the story your mind has been trying to tell you all along. The patterns will lose their grip, not because you stop thinking, but because you finally start hearing. When you listen, the endless loops become lessons. The restlessness becomes direction. The noise transforms into insight. Overthinking is not a problem to fix. It's not a flaw or a weakness. It's a signal, a guide, a mirror, showing you what your mind refuses to face in silence. The louder your thoughts, the more they're trying to tell you something important. The key isn't to silence them. It's to work with them, to understand their language, and to let them teach you instead of control you. First, notice without judgment. When your thoughts start to spiral, pause. Don't try to stop them. Don't scold yourself. Simply observe. Ask yourself, what is my mind trying to show me right now? The lesson is clear. Your thoughts are not enemies. They are messengers. Second, ask the right questions. Endless why or what if loops only deepen overthinking. Instead, ask, what is this thought protecting me from? Or, what feeling is hidden beneath this worry? Overthinking often points not to problems you need to solve, but to emotional needs you've left unmet. Third, allow silence to exist. Silence feels uncomfortable because it exposes what you've been avoiding. Sit with it. Let the stillness linger. In that quiet, the truth your mind has been circling can finally rise to the surface. Fourth, write it down. Thoughts gain clarity when they leave your head. Journaling reveals patterns, triggers, and unspoken needs that your mind keeps looping through. Giving your thoughts a space outside yourself transforms noise into insight. Fifth, shift focus from control to awareness. Overthinking often comes from the illusion that thinking equals safety. You can't predict every outcome, and trying to do so only fuels the loops. Awareness and acceptance are far more powerful than forcing solutions. Sixth, recognize your shadow. The uncomfortable thoughts, doubts, and flashes of fear you resist are often the shadow speaking. Instead of rejecting them, acknowledge them. Facing what you've ignored reduces its power over your mind and transforms noise into guidance. Seventh, practice gentle patience with yourself. Overthinking didn't appear overnight, and it won't disappear overnight. Each moment of observation, each acknowledgement of your shadow, each pause in silence is a step toward clarity. When you start seeing overthinking as a teacher rather than an enemy, the mind stops being a prison. The noise may remain at times, that's natural. But instead of trapping you, your thoughts can guide you toward insight, understanding, and self-awareness. The mind doesn't need to be silenced or fixed. It needs to be listened to, carefully, without fear. Overthinking isn't something you simply turn off. It's not a switch you can flip, and it's not a flaw to correct. It's a journey, a path through the noise, the loops, and the restless thoughts, toward a deeper understanding of yourself. The question isn't how to stop thinking, but how to walk alongside your thoughts without being carried away by them. The first step is awareness. Notice when your mind starts looping, when silence feels heavy, when control feels urgent. Awareness is not about judgment or self-criticism. It's simply recognizing that these patterns exist and that they have something to teach you. When you observe your thoughts without immediately reacting, you begin to see the signals your mind has been sending all along. The second step is acceptance. Accept that your mind is doing its job. Overthinking may feel exhausting, but it's also trying to protect you, to reveal hidden truths, to point out what you've avoided. Accepting the presence of these thoughts without resisting them softens their intensity. It doesn't mean you agree with every worry, every doubt, every replayed memory. It means you allow them to exist without giving them the power to dominate you. The third step is integration. Overthinking is often a sign of parts of yourself that have been ignored. Emotions, needs, questions, or traits you've pushed aside. Your mind repeats itself because it's asking you to acknowledge these pieces. The path beyond overthinking comes when you allow these aspects to be seen, understood, and integrated into your awareness. This doesn't eliminate the thoughts instantly, but it transforms them from chaotic loops into meaningful guidance. The fourth step is presence. The mind will wander, thoughts will arise, sometimes uninvited. But you don't have to follow every thought or give each one weight. Ground yourself in the present moment, even for a few breaths at a time. Notice the thoughts, notice the feelings, and let them pass like clouds in the sky. Over time, presence becomes a refuge, a space where your mind can rest, reflect, and respond rather than race, repeat, and control. The fifth step is trust. Trust that your mind is capable of showing you what you need, even if it does so in a messy, repetitive way. Trust that you don't need to solve everything at once, and that insight often comes in fragments, not in grand revelations. When you trust yourself and the process, overthinking becomes less of a trap and more of a guide. Finally, the sixth step is compassion. Be gentle with yourself. Overthinking didn't appear overnight, and it won't vanish overnight. Each moment you pause, observe, accept, integrate, and remain present is a small victory. Treat yourself as you would a friend who is learning to navigate the same noise. Compassion transforms frustration into curiosity, and struggle into discovery. Overthinking is not a failure. It is a doorway. It is an invitation to understand yourself more deeply, to listen to the messages your mind has been sending, and to find balance between thought and awareness.